Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I like this episode being kind of, obviously, playing, because of the time travel and everything, they're playing with, aesthetics and, genres and stuff like that, and obviously this kind of feels like a very, cheesy kind of 80s movie. I mean, it pulls from a lot, because even if you read the title of the episode, is what it was the Totally Excellent Adventures. I think it's Deke and Mack, or Mack and Deke, and so obviously playing on Bill and Ted. There's the musical aspect to it as well. There's also a little Doctor Who, some Short Circuit. Just all kind of put together in this, and I just thought that was so interesting. But regardless, tangents and all that. It was interesting because obviously we're picking up with last episode where Mac and Deke got left behind, and it's something must have went wrong. The fact of the matter is the ship kind of, Zephyr left without us, but obviously Mac's not in the best mindset, because for him it's I just needed a minute, and it's well, because of that, you and Deke are here stuck now. It's well, we gotta find, Deke is all about because Mac is maybe we accomplished the mission, because it's because of what Coulson did. But it's if that's the case, Deke's why would we stop in the 1980s for a couple minutes? He's that doesn't make any sense. He's none of this makes any sense. It's all this time stuff. The fact of the matter is we're not supposed to be changing stuff, because the past is sacred. He's talking about he kind of he's lashing at Deke because he's angry. He's mad because it's he lost his parents. It's one thing, not only did you lose your parents, under the circumstances you lost your parents, because obviously it directly correlates with what you're doing. So your parents suffered because of you trying to do the right thing. So it's that. Plus, let's not forget, you're responsible for killing the chronocoms that look like your parents. That is going to mess you up psychologically as well. But for him, it's just kind of you figure out whatever this is all about. Because Deke's I get it, dude. He's I lost my parents too. Well, because also, he was blaming Deke because of what Deke did. It's yeah, even if you thought what you were doing was right, you still shouldn't have done it. It's well, to be fair, we're beyond you're oh, make ripples, not waves. It's we're way beyond that. The fact of the matter is that Frankie was still alive changed everything. So your lives were never going... There are already massive ripples down the timeline anyway that weren't even directly correlated with him. It's Deke, who knows? I mean, you can make the argument Deke actually stopped the ripples, but I mean, even him stopping those ripples just created more ripples. So it's time travel, But once again, Mac is just pissed because it's he needs someone to blame it and all of this, So... But Deke's I'm here for you. He's I know what it's to lose your parents. So it's he's I lost them early too, so I understand what you're going through. You don't have to go through this alone. But Mac was just whatever this Chronocom thing is, if there's anything to it, you have to handle it. And he bounces. He stops by his house where obviously his uncle's looking after him and his brother, but he had stopped by his parents' grave too, and it's just that was probably hours ago maybe for you, and it's right there in front of you, their graves and everything. It's a lot to kind of take in. And so, but we see him just kind of disappearing. He just needed to be away from everybody, and obviously Deke eventually tracks him down, but he wants to have nothing to do with Deke. But Deke periodically stops by him. He's hey, it's 83, it's the new year and everything, but Deke would stop by and check on him. Mac is just stuck in his depression. Then it turns out Deke left him something it's urgent. And I love that Mac went there. He's I'm looking for someone named Deke Shaw. He also goes by the D. I'm maybe that came up in previous seasons and I didn't remember that. I was oh, of course Deke would not know the what that colloquialism is, modern day being the D. And it's maybe he does. I don't think he does, with stuff that kind of comes up, with his limited knowledge, being from the future and everything. But it turns out Deke is going full blown Bill and Ted, got his band together, and they're singing, and I love that. Well, not just very Back to the Future as well. I'm trying to figure out, because it's been a long time since I've seen Bill and Ted, either the first two movies. Regardless, the fact of the matter is, it's I just thought that was kind of a neat thing. And you know what it also kind of reminds me of? It's kind of a weird thing to pull. It reminds me of what was I thinking of? Future Man. If you've ever seen the show Future Man, granted, Future Man's on a different level because it's weird and twisted and gross in some occasions, but it's just this episode in particular, especially the way Deke looks, it's like he reminds me of Wolf from Future Man. If you've seen Future Man, that means something to you. If you haven't, it doesn't mean anything. But I just thought that was just kind of interesting. But Mack is just looking like, oh my God, Deke. And immediately my brain was like, this is Deke to the max, always taking stuff from the future, going back in the past and making a killing. Let's not forget he runs a tech company after taking stuff that wasn't his from S.H.I.E.L.D. and applying the technology elsewhere. And I love even Mack calls him out for it later on. He's like, this is your thing. You take stuff that's not yours and then say you made it. But for Deke, also he's like, because he's like, Cricket. And I was like, why does that name Cricket sound so familiar? It's like, oh, right. And then Max like, I thought you said it was a shady dude. I was like, right, that's the shady dude that Deke had hired a while back that he was like, oh, yeah. But it's like, he needed a drummer and everything for the band. Also, it's like, because he sells Coke. And then the moment he said that, I was like, what? I was like, wait, what? I was like, this is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and we're saying that? And even Mac was like, oh, he's like, yeah. And then Deke's like, I've never seen the guy drink. I was like, oh, so you meant Coke as in, Coca-Cola. Okay. I was confused. And then later on, it's like, yeah, because, they don't know what they're doing because he brings up the fact is they're kind of his team and everything. He's like, but they're so high a lot of times they don't realize, like, what's going on. And he's like, because of all the drugs, because of all the drugs. And Mac's like, because of the Coke. And he's like, the soda? He's like, Deke, he's like, what's that have to do with the soda? And then it clicked in my head. It took me a while to be like, oh, Deke is so innocent. I was innocent for a little bit, thinking like, oh, when he said Coke, he was referring to Coca-Cola. I was like, no, Deke is under the impression he's referring to Coca-Cola, but it's the drug Coke. So it's like, once again, that like, oh, like, hey, Future Man not knowing stuff about the past. I just thought that was kind of interesting. But the fact is that Deke started his own team. He's got Roxy, he's got Olga, he's got Tommy and Ronnie, and then Cricket, just because they needed a drummer. So that was interesting. But like, this is his little ragtag team because it's like, I'm putting them together because he doesn't believe the mission's over. And it's like, yeah, like this is all kind of like specifically designed, the songs and stuff like that. Kind of making themselves big, kind of, it's their way to kind of infiltrate and stuff like that. I just thought that was kind of interesting. He's got his own little ragtag team. It's so interesting too because let's not forget he had his whole company back present day too, but we haven't, it's almost like filling that hole to a certain extent because it's like, yeah, all those people he had around him last season, now that's obviously, gone, so it's just like, I thought it was just kind of an interesting parallel I think they were kind of creating. But nevertheless, the fact of the matter is, it turns out at the same time, there's that dude Russell, who's played by the actor who I best know him for playing JT on the show Beauty and the Beast. I'm just like, hey, JT, that's so cool. But nevertheless, he's helping Sybil because it's like, oh man, he's like, I guess he's kind of a bit of a loner dude, and it's the thing of like, oh my god, like here's a robot lady, oh man, I made your voice, oh my god, you sound like a robot, oh my god, I'm gonna build you a robot. And at the time I was like, oh, this looks like something, I just can't place it. It's not till Mac later on makes a short circuit reference. I was like, right, that's what I was missing. Once again, hitting that 80 nostalgia with everything that they're combining together. I actually feel so bad for him because it's just like, JT is like, no, I made you. It's like, now you're making someone else. It's like, well, you played your role. And then he gets killed. I was like, also, he got killed super hard. I was like, this episode's super bloody. Like, almost cheesy 80s comically bloody. Like, especially later on, it's just like, oh man, that's like a lot of blood. I was like, has Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ever been this bloody before? But once again, it's because I guess the aesthetic they're going for. But I was like, I don't remember it ever being this bloody before. I was like, that's so interesting. Like I said, it seems like some shows have gotten, like this past season of Legends of Tomorrow got super bloody. I was like, I don't remember a show ever being this bloody before. So maybe it's just the times and everything like that, but I just thought that was just like interesting. Obviously, like they had their whole like they're in the lighthouse and everything in the 80s, and obviously Max like, this isn't yours, but Deke is like got everyone trained and stuff like that. I also love the whole bit about Olga not being good at it. Like, she only knows a couple things in English, so amazingly everything she says is in Russian and everything. And it's like, oh yeah, like here's watch our makeshift team in action, and Olga's using real explosive. Even it was either Tommy or Ronnie that ended up shooting like Roxy in the back, and it's just like, wait, what? This is all haphazard. And the fact of the matter is, Mack is getting pissed at Deke because it's like, this isn't a good team. This is what you do. You take from people and stuff like that. Well, because I can't remember if this, I'm probably going at this out of order, but then it's like Coulson's actually still alive. He's got a hard drive, so he's just on the TV, which is such interesting timing because it reminds me of S.H.I.E.L.D from Harley Quinn. He's like on the TV at the end of the season, so for it just, but it's like, hey, Coulson, his body's gone, but his hard drive's still there, so that's pretty dope. And so I even love that thing of like, he doesn't like cricket because cricket constantly puts videotapes in his VCR slot, and even Matt's got his face like, ugh. Like, just like the innuendo that is, an innuendo for double entendre and all that. But I just thought that was just that whole thing, and even like Deke showing off Mack, like the gun axe and everything, and he's like, no, he's like, yeah, like, you think I'm not gonna let my buddy go out there like this? And it's so interesting. I didn't really pick this. It took a while in the episode for me to think of this, but it's like, it's very reflective, Mack and Deke's relationship. Like, it's very Fitz and Mack, because remember, like, that's how like Mack and Fitz were like, I'd still say they're kind of still best buddies, him calling him Turbo and everything. And it's like they were always like best buds, especially like after like the whole thing with Ward, where like his brain was messed up because he was deprived of air for so long. Like, Mack became his translator, kind of like was able to kind of help, Fitz kind of get back to being who he was. And it was like, seeing him and Deke throughout this episode heavily reminded me of that, and I think that's what they were kind of going for aesthetically. Like, because I don't really remember Deke and, I mean, they've had their, even last season they had like their back and forth, but it was like, I think this episode really made me feel like, oh, it's almost like Deke was kind of like, I mean, once again, it's very befitting that, Fitz being his grandfather and everything, but still, I just thought that was kind of fascinating. I also love that the entire episode is just a retelling, because like Deke is explaining all this to May, because May's like, you started a band, because he's like, yeah, I told you weren't going to believe it. And she's like, well, I'm curious where this all takes us next. But it's so sad too, because like, obviously Deke's been making all this effort. He's like, Mack, we need you, but Mack is obviously still dealing with everything, so he didn't want anything to have anything to do with all this. He couldn't bring himself to come back, because it was also about like, the conversation came up about Yo-Yo, and he was kind of like, he wouldn't want Yo-Yo to see him like this. So when it was all said and done, though, I thought it was kind of interesting. In the grand scheme of things, just kind of like, first there's the whole cricket thing. Poor bastard. It's like, he got it super hard and it's bloody. Once again, it's like out of like a 80s like horror movie, and just like the amount of blood. And then later on, his girlfriend is like running and she's like, oh, cricket, and then she gets grabbed, and then once again a comical amount of blood splatters on the wall, and then just a pool drip. So I was like, that's a shit ton of blood. Once again, human body contains a lot of blood, so to be fair, but it's just kind of like, wow. It was interesting because obviously, like, they don't know everything. So, like, Roxy went, like, at Mack because of all the stuff that he said. And it's like, because even Deke was like, you can say whatever you want to about me, but not about my team or whatever. But it's kind of like, Roxy's like, the fact of the matter is, he's been looking after your kid, because she's under the impression thinking Mack is Mack's kid. He's like, he's even got your same name. It's like, he checks in on him, gets some stuff, and it's like, Mack's like, I didn't know he was doing that. It's like, yeah, he's been a good friend to you, whether you realize it or not. He's been checking on, Mack at, both as an adult and as a kid. And I thought that was actually super sweet. Because I'm sure probably in his mind. Also, I didn't talk about it, but I love that literally during the song, he says Daisy's name, and it's like, right, that's always going to be that, like, unrequited love of, like, he's always had a thing for Daisy. Once again, they're leaning more towards, they're making it seem like it's going to be a Daisy and Daniel situation, which is always kind of a bummer for him, because he's always had a thing for Daisy since, like, even season 5, so he's always had a thing for Daisy. So that's always just, kind of, sad in the grand scheme of things. Things didn't work out like that, But regardless of it, like, they're fighting against that thing, and it's like, exterminate. I was like, and there's your Doctor Who. These things are very Dalek-like until it's pull the trigger and start shooting actual bullets. I'm like, obviously that's not very Dalek-like. It's very, I'm sure, short-circuit-like. Which, even saying all that's kind of crazy, because I'm like, once again, I don't remember those movies at all, because, like, I have not seen them since I was a kid, which all this nostalgia is weird for me, because, like, I'm not an 80s kid, I'm a 90s kid, but, like, I still grew up these movies just years after they came out, so it's kind of weird, because even Bill and Ted, I feel like I didn't see that till I was a teenager, maybe, so that was like 2000s by the time I actually saw Bill and Ted. Maybe I saw it in the 90s. I don't remember. Regardless, tangents and all that. But Mack kind of like helps take like this whole makeshift team. Olga doing her thing. Olga gets it bad. She gets sliced up. She gets shot with a laser, which, hey, that's very Dalek-like. But luckily, everyone gets suited up. And I even love that conversation between him and Roxy. It's like, my parents died because of these things. And he's like, someone's, I don't know when or how, but someone's going to pay. And then she was like, the robots? He's like, yeah, I meant the robots. Yeah, that's what I meant. I love killing the tension like that. He's saying something dramatic, and then the camera pulls away, and her just look at him like, you mean the robots? It's like, yeah, that's exactly what I meant. But luckily, working together, they end. Because I thought it was always interesting, too, because it's also the conversation about, like, obviously, Sybil she's able to access the time stream. That's probably a device we should probably know exactly what it is. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure like maybe it's kind of a thing of like, oh, you idiot, this is obviously so-and-so device. Maybe they'll explain it in the next episode, but whatever device, because her access to time stream was taken from her, she took something from S.H.I.E.L.D. that kind of replicated that or could give her access to it. So sadly, we see that she ends up kind of getting that out of S.H.I.E.L.D. and poor Tommy and Ronnie ended up running, but when it was all said and done, they did save the day, and I thought was pretty neat that Deke being like, it's okay, I really knew about your fear of lasers, and it's like, okay, you're a little bit of a coward, like the fact of the matter is that's still not gonna make you get you kicked off this team or the band. And it's like they hug, and I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. And just like this makeshift ragtag group, I mean, you can make the argument that's what this show was built off, a ragtag group kind of put together by Coulson, so it's like, it's almost befitting, Mack kind of almost do his version of it as well, so I thought that was kind of neat. And then also him taking Mack to see his younger self. It's like, yeah, so how are they? It's like, yeah, you just got straight A's, you were reading this certain book, so you're crying. He's like, yeah, let's keep that between us. He's like, can't make any promises about that, but it's like, obviously losing your parents, it's never something that will ever go away, but it gets a little easier every day, so obviously that's something Matt's kind of learning, because he's been, obviously as an adult he's dealing with it, and obviously as a kid he's dealing with it. So it's like, all right, so obviously you're a friend of the band, so it's like, if you're in a band, like, what do you play? Like, maybe the harmonica? He's like, no, I'm more of a sax man. He's like, of course, the big guy plays his sax. And so I just thought that was neat. I think this episode also adds an interesting perspective, because it's probably set up to be like, this entire episode was about what Mack and Deke were up to. Maybe next episode we find out what the rest of the team was up to when they like disappeared, because like apparently they've been going for 20 months. And obviously for Yo-Yo, she's worried about Mack, because it's like, obviously like being alive and okay are two different things, like going through all this alone. Luckily he didn't have to, part of it he did, but eventually he didn't have to go through it alone. And so I thought that was kind of neat. And then it's like, all right, we got like 27 days. And the fact is they came back specifically, I think, once again, and I think that plays into the fact is that once again, next episode we'll get the perspective, because it's like, oh, they came back and it's like, oh, we have 27 days. It's like, oh, you know exactly when you're going to jump again. So it's like, how do you know that? Because I guess, because wherever they were probably further in the timeline. Like they probably got a little bit more control over this whole time travel thing now, since they can specify like, like where they were and what they were. Like I say, I'm interested to kind of find it out, but like the fact is, because before they could never know when they were necessarily going to 100% jump until almost like the last minute. But now for them to have that much of a window, literally almost a month's time to let you know ahead of time of like, oh yeah, like this is the next scheduled jump. I think, we'll learn about that more. But when everyone's kind of reunited, and then it's like May's talking to Coulson the way she is, and Coulson's like, that's very cold of you, May, even for you. And then Mack, him and Yo-Yo hugging and everyone being happy to reunite. It's like, yeah, this is the team. And she's like, these are S.H.I.E.L.D. agents? He's like, yeah, but like obviously he didn't kind of have to go through all of this alone, because he had their support. So I was like, that's neat. So I was like, I'm curious to see what happens to this ragtag team, a group of team, like, what their future holds for them when it comes to S.H.I.E.L.D. and stuff like that. But obviously we're not done in the 80s, because at the end we see the device getting dropped off to Nathaniel, and it's like, well, of course he's alive. And most likely the SOB probably has Daisy's powers too, because even Sybil was like, oh yeah, there's like a 2% chance he'd survive, and of course I was like, of course it was going to end up being that. So because I figured as much, since he was just buried on a robot. I was like, he's most likely not dead. Well, it wasn't even just a robot, it was like wood and stuff, but regardless, I'm like, so he's still out and about. He probably has powers now too, probably exactly like Daisy's, and he's had time to work on them too, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Obviously, like, Sybil still using Hydra. I wonder, is Nathaniel more so going to be... Well, I'm sure he's letting Gideon handle all the Hydra stuff after his dad's dead. So it's like, well, it's like, you killed my dad. Plus, I'm also kind of like the mad scientist of the family. So I kind of did my thing. So I got extra reason to come after you now, too. I don't know. But nevertheless, I'm very, very interested to ultimately see where all of this takes us. It's interesting too because, like, I mean, obviously he's just a means to an end. I don't know if he realizes that, because it's like, well, she literally says the same thing that she said to Russell, and we saw how that ended. She was like, oh, we're going to be the perfect pair, and it's like, you know, until we're not, you know, until you're no longer necessary. It's like, obviously, you know, it's going to be interesting. It's also very reflective too, because it's like, well, Coulson's into TV like he is, and Sybil's into TV like she is, so it's just it's neat how that kind of works out like that. And I think that's the parallel they're going for. But either way, I'm very excited to see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.